Okay, so God created the whole universe. But if God created everything, what created God? Well, the very question assumes that God's not God. Because by definition, God's eternal. God's uncreated. God doesn't have an origin. But isn't that impossible? Isn't it the height of foolery to think that something could always exist for all eternity, throughout all infinity? Well, maybe. But everybody tends to do it. You know, the atheists that don't believe in God, who like to throw out this question a lot, will state it without realizing that they more create a problem for themselves than that they solve. Everybody believes in something that's eternal, eventually. An atheist will believe that matter's eternal. You know, they used to teach that the universe that we have right now is uncreated, that it's eternal, that it always existed. The Greeks taught this for thousands of years, and that prevailing wisdom was shown to be untrue with the Big Bang. And the Big Bang was very unsettling for many atheists because anything that begins to exist must have a cause outside of itself. We know that all things that begin to exist have a cause outside of themselves. The argument that atheists had proposed for thousands of years was that the universe is eternal, that the universe has no cause outside of itself, and so there is no God. But that was shown to be untrue with the Big Bang. Whether it happened 14 billion years ago, or 13.8 billion years ago, or 20 billion years ago, or whatever the numbers turn out to be, is beside the point. I don't think it was quite that long ago, but the universe was created. The evidence shows that the universe has to have been created. So, if the universe has to have been created, then it has to have had a cause outside of itself. So the Christians like myself say that God created the universe. So that's when they ask, so what created God? So who created God, or what created God? Well, God didn't have a creator. God doesn't have an origin. God doesn't have a beginning. Isn't that impossible? No. It's impossible for anything that began to exist not to have a cause. Everything that begins to exist has to have had a cause. With God, there was no beginning. God's unaffected by time. God's outside of time. God's not bound by the rules of time. And so, it would be a categorical mistake to say that God had a beginning, that God had a cause. Because God's not bound by the rules of time the way that we are. The way that the rest of creation is. But isn't that some sort of colossal contradiction? No. Look, everybody believes in the eternal. Everybody. Everywhere. We might not realize it, but we do. Atheists believe that dirt's eternal. They believe that the universe is all that there is, all that there was, all that there ever will be. You know, like Carl Sagan's Cosmos is famous for saying that. But that's not true. It's really not true. But the thing is, they're saying, when they say that the universe is eternal, Stephen Hawking with his infinite universes theory talks about an infinite regression of big bangs and big crunches, that, you know, the universe expands and then it contracts and then it expands and then it contracts in an infinite cycle. And what they're saying is that the universe is uncreated, that the universe is infinite, that the universe had no beginning, that the universe will ultimately have no end, because the universe that exists is infinitely expanding and contracting, expanding and contracting. And to explain why this universe is so perfectly created for us, they say, well, it's not perfectly created. Actually, there's an infinite number of universes and an infinite amount of space. Never mind the fact that there's no evidence that this is the case. But this is the theory that those who do not believe in God hold to. That these things, that this matter is eternal. That it's uncreated. That it's self-existing. The evidence doesn't say this. The evidence says that the universe had a beginning. The evidence, all the evidence that we have is that there's only one universe. All the evidence that we have is that the universe in which we live has been created by God at some point in the past. But you see that everybody believes in something that's eternal. The atheists say that the universe is eternal. I think it's far more logical to say that God's eternal. I think that it's far more logical to say that God's eternal. Because God's a self-sustaining entity. The universe is not. The universe is made up of matter and energy and space. And these are finite resources. Energy, once it's used up, it's done with. It's gone. The amount of energy in the universe is supposed to be constant. Well, the truth is, the amount of usable energy in the universe is not a constant. The amount of usable energy in the universe is diminishing. Whether you're talking about the oil that we use to fuel our cars, or whether you're talking about the sun that is burning, and someday it'll burn out. This is going to be true whether it's running through nuclear energy or whether it's some other form of energy. The universe is running out of speed. So the theory is we don't need to worry about it because it'll crunch up and then blow back out and the universe will exist again. Of course, we won't be around to see it. We're supposed to just take this on faith. But it's far more reasonable to say that God is eternal than to say that the dirt of the universe is eternal. That the hydrogen, the helium of the universe is eternal. It is far more reasonable to say that God is eternal than to say that the universe is eternal. And so everybody gets to the point where they say, okay, something came from nothing. Something came from nothing. Something has to be eternal. The fact that we exist in time proves that there has to be something that is eternal. Because we began to exist. So eventually you go back in the clock. Eventually you have to get somewhere where something's eternal. The atheists will say that it's matter, that it's energy, that it's the raw materials of the universe, and the universe itself is eternal. They say that they don't have any ultimate explanation for how the universe came to be eternal. I don't have an explanation for how God is eternal, but God never came to be eternal. God always has been eternal. And it's a matter that I take on faith, but I think it's a far more reasonable step to take on faith than to say that the universe is eternal. I think it's far more reasonable.